Hi everyone, I'm Law of the West, and this video is intended to be a buyer's guide for the Mirai Pulse and the Pulse LX. So I'm going to be talking about what kind of vehicles they are and what kind of player would be interested in getting them. I'm also going to be talking about what the roles are that they play when compared to the other Gravlevs and other smaller vehicles. Then I'll finish things off with a brief summary. My initial concern with the Pulse was that you can only do so much with a Gravlev before you end up running out of ideas, especially if you're trying to make sure that whatever the newest feature is that you're adding to it doesn't end up making the others obsolete. I've been personally holding out for a Gravlev that was made by the Vandal, because knowing them, it'd probably have a huge Mad Max style blade mounted onto the front of it, and I'm totally okay with that. So when it comes to the Pulse, what does it bring to the table that the other Gravlevs don't? Well, its size, or to be more precise, its lack of size. This thing is tiny. In fact, it's the smallest vehicle that's currently in the game, measuring out to be just slightly larger than a 2 SCU-sized box. Which means that with a little finagling, you should be able to get a Pulse into any ship that can carry a container that's 2 SCUs in length. And so far, it's already been confirmed that the MPUV can hold several of them, and it can also fit into ships that even the PTV can't fit into, like the Pisces and the Redeemer. That's the thing that makes this vehicle stand out amongst the others. It allows people who previously couldn't be able to use even something as small as a PTV as a transport option to finally be able to bring a ground vehicle with them. And since a majority of players own small ships, this Gravlev is going to be very appealing to a lot of people. The Pulse also represents a throwback to the original principles that Star Citizen was founded on, where they were trying to expand what you could do with the ships that you have rather than trying to pigeonhole things into archetypes and focus on specialty ships that were used for only one particular purpose. And that's what the Pulse does. It increases what your options are when it comes to Gravlevs. So what good is having a small ground vehicle? Eventually, you're going to have to land your ship and get out of it. And when you do, it's going to be nice to have something that can turn what would otherwise be a long, arduous walk into a quick bike ride. One thing that I have to say about the standard Pulse is that at first I was very skeptical about how useful a gun on a vehicle like this would be, but I later found out that it's a size 2 gimbaled laser Gatling weapon. And I was all in after using it for the first time against a pack of foot soldiers. The only caveat that I can give is I wouldn't recommend using it in a bunker, because close quarters is the worst possible way to use this weapon. And it's not going to be very effective when it comes to taking out enemies that are set up in an elevated position like you'd find in a lot of the settlements. So you're not going to go in and storm every enemy encampment using the Pulse, but it's going to be very effective when used against any NPCs that are unlucky enough to find themselves staring down the business end of its minigun. I've also found that it works really well if you can find a choke point in a bunker or the 890's interior and then try to bait enemies to come to you. There's also the Pulse LX. The Pulse LX is the racing variant that replaces the Gatling gun with an intake that increases its speed and maneuverability. At this point, it's hard to tell how good of a racer the Pulse is going to be until after they've done a lot more tuning to the racing mechanic and created some circuits for these vehicles to start competing in. But I decided to invest in a Pulse LX for reasons other than racing. I got one because I love the idea of having a vehicle that's fast, extremely maneuverable, and is compact enough to be carried around by even the smallest transport ship. So I plan on using the Pulse as a fast way to get around when doing FPS salvaging, handheld repairs, and as a way to get from one ship to another when I can't use a docking collar. And because of that, it doesn't matter if the LX doesn't have any offensive or defensive capabilities. In those circumstances, I'm more concerned with how well a vehicle performs over everything else. And that's exactly what the LX does. So, who'd be interested in getting these vehicles? I classify the standard Pulse as being a must-have for anyone who owns a small or medium-sized ship and wants to get a ground vehicle as a companion craft to go along with it. I've been trying to look for a downside to getting the Pulse as opposed to any of the other Gravlevs, and so far I've only come up with a few things. The first is that the Pulse has a lot less hit points than the others do. Also, having 2 size 1 guns like the Nox and the Dragonfly will give you a higher DPS than a single size 2 weapon does. And then there's the Force that has a shield, which is something that none of the others have. The Dragonfly also has extra storage, a second seat, and is supposed to have a compact mode. And the quad bike is going to be more stable, have more storage, and has a smaller signature than the others do. But none of those things are going to matter if the Gravlev that you're talking about can't fit into your vehicle while the Pulse does. Another thing that I'd like to add to this is that at the time I made this video, the Pulse was being offered as a war bond that came with LTI, but don't worry if you missed out on the sale. Every ship and vehicle is going to be purchasable in-game using the in-game currency. And a vehicle like the Pulse is going to be very inexpensive to get in-game, which makes it a great first in-game goal to set your sights on when you're earning credits for doing missions. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments section if you've already purchased one or not and what your reasons are for it. I've been your host, Law of the West. Thanks for watching, and take care.